All right, people. Good morning here in Atlanta, Georgia. Um, but it is evening in Mauritius, where my brother Farai Munjoma is at, and brother Farai is part of the African Leadership University, which is a great, I would say, resource for those who are interested in expanding their education overseas in Africa. I think the misconception is that universities, and correct me if I'm wrong, Farai, but this is coming from somebody who lives in the West, someone who's come in contact with a lot of African immigrants who have left Africa to come to the West to further their education. And for the most part, the stereotype or what we've been told is that degrees or learning in Africa, as far as universities, once you get that degree, it's not as credible, I guess. And correct me if I'm wrong, as we say a degree or university coming from the West. And that's from, if you have a degree, we'll say from Sheikh Anta Diop University in Senegal, but if someone else has a degree from, we'll say, University of Massachusetts, and say they were both, I guess, interviewing for a job in Senegal, from my understanding, the degree from UMass holds more weight in the eyes of a Senegalese employer. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's actually very true.
And I just think that's just backwards, if you ask me. So I know African Leadership University is changing that. So it's a great resource, and again, I'm happy to have a brother Farai on. We're gonna take some questions, get into details about the actual university itself. Talk about brain drain, which I think is somewhat exaggerated because when I go to Africa, I see a lot of African ingenuity on the continent. Even though there's some that's left, there's still a lot on the continent. So we're also going to talk about African brain drain and keeping African ingenuity on the actual continent to help build the continent. So, Brother Farai, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Really appreciate it, and it's a really huge honor and pleasure to be on this podcast today and show.
Uh-huh.
So, just to get into the deep aspects of this whole topic around African Leadership University and Ingenuity. So, my name is Farai Munjoma. I am a student from Zimbabwe and currently based in Mauritius, here at the African Leadership University, and studying business management. I'm in my second year now, and just focusing on the issue of the name African Leadership University, you might try to wonder why it's called the African Leadership University. And as you might know, that in Africa we are having some of the worst problems in terms of leadership. That the continent is lagging behind in terms of development, both from a social, political, and economic perspective, has all been pinned down to the quality of leaders that the continent has been producing. And when it comes to leaders, most of you might know of Nelson Mandela, and of recent, you might know of Robert Mugabe from the country that I'm coming from, who is going to be impeached very soon, or who's facing that kind of action from his people. So, what the African Leadership University is trying to achieve is trying to reimagine how education, tertiary education, specifically on the African continent, is approached. By that, I mean that rather than having our young people go and study abroad, why can we not create institutions that are relevant and sensible to the African context and the challenges that we're facing? Because, as you might know, the education system is becoming more and more obsolete. And the
Right.
challenges that Africa is facing today require a fresh approach to the problems, as well as high levels of exposure. And what we are doing here at the African Leadership University is we are bringing together students from across 35 different African countries and putting them onto one campus. And when we do that, we are creating already this Pan-African community where a student from Zimbabwe has access to someone from Cape Verde, Egypt, Kenya, Senegal, you name it. And by virtue of bringing us together, they are teaching us core skills like data analytics, data projects, communication for impact, and entrepreneurial leadership, which is one of the things which is at the core of our curriculum. And data and decisions is also looking at how young Africans can look at some of the challenges and the trends of how their communities are growing. Because mind you, by 2035, Africa is going to have one of the biggest populations in the world,
and youngest as
and the
well.
youngest. You have the average age of your African between 14 and 18, right? So what this poses is we are going to need to create more jobs for these people. We're going to need to provide them access to education, and by that, that's why there's this huge focus on the concept of Africa rising, because there's a huge population that's growing and we have the vast amount of resources that are still untapped into. And the best way to kind of allow that one extra lot of people that's going to come onto this earth is to empower the young people through the education institution and give them the right mindset and networks in order to be able to go back to their communities and deliver high impact projects and go back and initiate that same philosophy of Pan-Africanism. Because again, you need to know that African communities have been so segmented in the past because of colonization and different disadvantaged backgrounds that we're coming from, civil wars, etc. But that narrative is changing, and it's changing as we are finding more and more people becoming educated and democracy is starting to take place. As you can see in Zimbabwe now, people are actually marching and they're getting their voices heard. And the people that are making part of that movement are young people. So we have to tap into that as well.
Okay. So somebody mentioned this in the chat room already, and I know we talked about it offline. The misconception, and correct me if I'm wrong, if there's any truth in this or not. The misconception that African universities or the quality of African education is poor, poor labs, poor research centers. What separates you all from, I guess, the idea that, these African universities just don't have the resources to provide a worthwhile education to the people of Africa? I mean, is that true or not? Or can you go in and talk about that?
Okay. So when it comes to universities, I think the biggest thing that separates us from any typical African university is, first of all, as I've mentioned, the aspect of community. We are bringing together people from different parts of the continent. That's one. Two, the university is well equipped, and we are bringing in a new model that focuses more on pulling together some of the best resources online and offline and some of the world's best facilitators and bringing them on the continent and saying, you're coming from Egypt, you're coming from Australia, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's high time we stop working in silos and bring all those world-class facilitators and say, here's a population of young African people. Let's work with them and let's educate them. Let's pool all our knowledge and help this continent go forward. Now, how that differs from a typical African university, for instance, is that most of them are public sector are run by the governments. And because of that lack of leadership or prioritization of tertiary education, there's not enough or inadequate resources that are channeled towards public run institutions. And you'll see that the quality of the graduates is also affected because students have learned without access to the right facilitators, or they're using obsolete equipment in the laboratories. This has an impact on the output. But LU, in this sense, is collaborating with so many institutions across the spectrum, and it's privately run as well. So that kind of set us apart from the typical African university.
Okay. So here in America, and you mentioned this somewhat earlier, how a college education is becoming somewhat obsolete. People are leaning more towards entrepreneurship. You have people spending literally like $40,000 to $60,000 a year, racking up college debt for degrees that are pointless. Is there an entrepreneurial aspect that's taught at African Leadership University?
Yes.
Okay.
And as I had mentioned, so
and not to cut you off, because entrepreneurship at university today is it's not taught at all. It's something you kind of have to learn on your own, or you go to like like this private school. I don't know. It's not taught at the university level. But you're saying at African Leadership University, there's a course or a program that encourages that.
Yeah, and so just a bit about how the university works. Within your first year, actually, you have 4 programs that you take part in. So there's entrepreneurship leadership, and they're teaching you to focus on understanding users within your community, and you do this course for the entire year. They take you from ideation, problem statement framing, all the way until you come up with an idea or a solution to a problem. And because we're creating a network of people across public sector, private sector, and we then provide our students access to a 4-month internship, just like you have in the States. You go for summer, people go for internships, etc. But in here, with the university directly assisting their students to go on entrepreneurial internships. So you can actually go back to your home country for 4 months. The project that you've been working on at school, you go back to your community and then you start implementing it. And they provide you with the support and the advisory and link you to venture capitalists and people that give you the right expertise.
Right.
I'm personally an example of someone that is benefiting from such an initiative, because school becomes more exciting now, because I'm not going to learn something that I'm not going to use. Everything that I'm learning, I'm channeling it towards creating my job at the end of the degree program.
And that's great, because a lot of people in America, the majority, myself included, but I was on scholarship. I played sports. I played American football and I ran track. So I have no college debt. But a lot of people are just going to college and getting degrees just to appease their parents. But they're getting these degrees and racking up all this college debt. And I want to read this article that just popped up, how crazy it is, how there's going to be a student loan crisis here in America. And they're racking up all this debt in degrees that are pointless. Like, you have a degree in what? I understand if you want to be a lawyer, a doctor, engineer, I get it. But if you're spending $40,000 to $50,000 a year to get a degree in liberal arts, you're wasting money. But go ahead and finish your thought. And I want to share this article with you to tell you how crazy it is out here. That just came across my feed. Go ahead.
Awesome. And also on the issue of debt, I'm sure people might be asking themselves, like, so how are students funding themselves to go to the African Leadership University? And with regards to that, they've come up with what they call the income sharing agreement. And this has been used in South America, etc., where students are able to pay what their families are able to pay upfront. And then the institution, supported by what they call the African Leadership Finance Corporation, invest into every student's education by giving them the access to the last resources that they need. So what that means is, if, for instance, you're paying 15,000 annually, 15,000 United States dollars annually, and then you're able to pay, let's say, 6,000 of that.
Right.
The remainder of that is then paid by the institution. And then that is flexible from student to student, because other guys like yourself might be running track, and at the end of the day, you get a partial scholarship. But the gap is covered by the institution. And what the income sharing agreement allows you to then do is, when you graduate, you are not under pressure to pay back the loan. So it's focused on deducting a particular percentage of your income, whether you're earning $1 million or you're earning $5,000. They will take that particular percentage of your income for the next 10 years. And even when you go to grad school or when you start an entrepreneurship venture, they are aware that you won't be earning so much income. So they give you a holiday. So you will not be paying at that time. So even the headache of saying, am I going to accrue so much debt by the time I graduate? The students are kind of like relieved from that. So it's kind of an innovative way of also making sure that students from marginalized communities access a high quality education.
The quality of, I would say, the instructors. I talked to a guy from Ghana, and he was saying that the instructors at the university in Accra, I think Kwame Nkrumah University, they were barely being paid anything. With the, I guess, how are you guys able to fund yourselves and also fund having, quality instructors to, instruct and teach you guys?
So with regards to that question, one interesting thing about the university is everyone that is coming from wherever they come, like people coming from Stanford and starting to teach here, it's the vision on impacting people. And that has attracted investment. So the investors are actually investors that come and impact investors that come and invest into the university. We also have a foundation that's running, and the institution that is also being run by that is being paid by the students. So there is, and a couple of grants that come from the government as well. But there are multiple streams that are coming in. But the biggest bet that they've put on the universities on the income sharing agreement, where they've asked people and investors to bring in and pull in money to the university with the hope that these young people, and by the way, the entry rate of applicants at LU is 5%. So they are getting some of the most well motivated and students across Africa, and betting on them to say that within the next coming 5 to 10 years, the student is able to get enough income that they will pay back into the income sharing pot, which will then in return sponsor future students to come to the university.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me read this article to you. This is how bad the student loan debt crisis is here in America. So what they're doing now, Farai, if you can't pay your student loan bill, you can no longer have a job. So basically, if you take out a loan to get a, I guess, nursing certification or nursing degree, if you can't pay that back, they will take away your nursing degree now, or certification. So you won't have a job. This is crazy. So here we go. I just want to read part of this to tell you how crazy it is out here, and how maybe an option like African Leadership University, is something that people should consider. Fall behind on your student loan payments, lose your job. Fellow people realize that the loans they take out to pay for their education could eventually derail their careers. But in 19 states, government agencies can seize state-issued professional license from residents who default on their educational debts. Another state, South Dakota, suspends driver's license, making it nearly impossible for people to get to work. So if you're not paying your student loan, they could take away your accreditation or license, and they could suspend your driver's license. This is crazy.
It's totally ridiculous, because now then you're putting people in a leash and dictating how they're going to run their lives. And yeah, it's a really sad reality. And
this is crazy. Firefighters, nurses, teachers, lawyers, massage therapists, barbers, psychologists, and real estate brokers have all had their credentials suspended or revoked. So if you're going after professional license, and if you fail to pay or repay that loan, they could take it away from you. And it's like, how are you going to earn a living?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. That's crazy. And suspending driver's license too. Yeah, I mean, that's
So now
just,
that they're taking away from people.
yeah, but see, the thing is, how are you going to be able to work and pay back your debt if they take away your license that you worked for? Yeah, that's,
I actually think that there are opportunities for some of these people and for diaspora to start looking at what are alternative education opportunities. And LU in this sense is you are not going to incur a student debt of over $60,000 when you come and learn at African Leadership University. And by the way, some of the partners that we are having as our academic partners are Glasgow Caledonian University, we have Nelson Mandela University in South Africa, and you're definitely guaranteed that with the quality of education that you have and the opportunities that you get access to, you will be able to transition from school into the job market or into whatever field that you want to get to without having someone take away your driver's license when you fail to pay it, right?
yeah, that's ridiculous. Can you go into a little bit of the history of African Leadership University as far as when it was founded? Who are the founding fathers or our mothers, I guess?
Okay, so the African Leadership University was an idea born out of the genesis of the African Leadership Academy, which is our sister organization that is based in South Africa. So the African Leadership Academy is a pre-university program typical of your high school, where they bring in about so many kids from all over the continent and then bring them onto one campus in Johannesburg for a 2-year program, where they then write their exams and then go to university. And after being in existence for 8 years, they realized that most of their high-performing students were going to study in America because they didn't have an option for affordable and good universities to study at on the continent. And then that's when they decided to come up with the idea to create the African Leadership University in 2014. So this is actually the third cohort of students, and next year we'll be receiving our fourth cohort. And we've opened 2 campuses, actually, one in Mauritius and one in Rwanda, making
Okay.
it available in 2 countries. So you get to have an option to get the same quality of education in 2 different geographic locations, Rwanda or Mauritius. And in the next coming years, there's actually a vision to further expand into other untapped African markets where there are an increasing demand. There is an increasing demand in tertiary education. And the guy behind this whole project is called Fred Swaneker.
Mm-hmm.
So Fred Swaneker is a former McKinsey guy who went to Stanford for his MBA, and after realizing he's passionate for Africa and how he, having grown up in Africa and lived in over 5 different countries because of either war or having faced challenges all the way from Ghana and ending up staying in Botswana, he realized that the reason why his family was moving so much and always unsettled at any given time was because of the leadership of the people that were in the countries that he was staying. And that has somehow become part of his passion to impact the next generation of African leaders. And their goal is by 2060, create 3 million leaders across the continent.
You know, Kante he just made a, let me ask you this question and let me get your opinion on this. Most Africans don't really get educated to help their communities. They just want to help their own families. So it doesn't really matter how educated they are. What are your thoughts on that?
May you please repeat the first part?
Most Africans don't really get educated to help their communities. They just want to help their own families. Is there any truth to that? Like, what are your thoughts on that? as far as
I think
Africans not, I guess, giving back to their communities and just really focusing on their family units?
I think it's a really subjective perspective, and I can definitely use different examples of African people and entrepreneurs that have been able to impact their communities. And we can talk of Strive Masiwa. He's the
Mm-hmm.
guy that owns the biggest telecom communications company in Zimbabwe. You know, we can talk of all these different companies, but looking at the ordinary citizen, it is the mandate of everyone to take care of their family first. But how do we look at a typical African family? And this is something that is definitely unknown or not considered by um, people who haven't had so much exposure to Africa. Is in Africa, beyond your family, who's your mother and father, there's the issue of an extended family, right? And
Mm-hmm.
extended families are people are units of families that are ranging not from your typical 3 or 5 people family, but from 1 to 25 people. So already that's half of a neighborhood, right?
Right.
Because you also realize that not many people have gotten access to an education in Africa. And because there's that one guy from a family who is going to go back to go somewhere and get a typical education, when they come back, the entire family depends on them for survival and for upkeep. And you do not only invest in your own family, you invest in a network of relatives and family, because in Africa, you are everyone's son and you're everyone's brother.
Right.
And we are not as nuclear as disconnected in terms of family. And we're having so many people come back to the continent, even after going to the States or to Europe, and coming and setting up companies and NGOs that impact people and creating jobs for the locals
Mm-hmm.
and even educating them. So we are definitely seeing a trend in that. And it's I would say it's somehow unfair now to say that Africans are only investing in their families, because not many Africans have gotten access to a good education as yet. Because to be honest, it's only 10% of Africans that have gotten access to education to date.
Uh-huh.
10% of youth. 90% is out.
See, see, and this is the thing. When I go to Africa, Africans are so, and see, there's a correlation between the number of languages you speak and how intelligent you are. All the Africans I know who live on the continent speak at least 3 languages. Their native indigenous language, maybe 1 or 2 of those. They speak English, or they might also speak another European language like maybe French or Italian. So I mean, Africans are very intelligent. Um, Someone in the chat room said, Kia has a question. Do you think that African schools are better than schools in the USA? Is there any way you could uh, speak on
That's a
that,
really
or or is that? I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Like, is there like some way we can measure that or
I
expand
think so. One thing that I definitely believe in is what I feel the role of an education is. And mind you, I will not comment on an education system in the States because I'm only a spectator,
on?
right?
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I'm only a spectator. I see the products of the system and what they have done to their communities. That is what I believe is the role of an education and in any institution, in any country. That the
Well,
school,
then, if that's the case, then
yeah.
the predominantly Black universities here in America, we could say the public school system in America has been an absolute failure then.
Yeah.
If we're basing the role of universities in regards to the community. I
And
mean, I could go ahead and say that right now. Now we're gonna base how one is better than the other. Then, like I said, I can't speak on the, well, I just know a lot of Africans, they want to come to the West to get the further education. And, you know, African degree, depending on which university at, doesn't hold as much weight or seen as credible from a university in America that could be the absolute worst university in America. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. So actually, one of my professors is an alumni of Morehouse College from the States.
Yes, I live right around the corner from Morehouse in Atlanta.
He did economics from Morehouse and is the one teaching us here now. And the reason why he said he left the States is because he had had enough of the education system thing and was coming to a new place and a way there was the flexibility to innovate around how you teach kids and how you make them understand what community they want to grow in rather than what jobs they want to grow into.
Mm-hmm.
And because African education system is a carbon copy of the American or Western education system,
right? Which is failing. I mean, it's failing.
Yeah, and now it's 100 years into this education system, and we're realizing, you know what, this system is not working for us.
Right.
Let's come up with a new way that we can have our young people learn the philosophies of the continent to understand the goal of community. Because to date, it's very sad to note that in Zimbabwe, in Zimbabwe, you cannot have a decent conversation with someone from Mozambique because of our colonial histories. They speak Portuguese, we speak English, and they are our neighbors. So how do you nurture collaboration and connect from a cultural perspective when already the background and culture has been impacted by two different communities? So with this new current learning model, Africa is actually realizing that let us not disconnect ourselves. Let us bring everyone together and make them realize that your problem, a Nigerian problem, is a Zimbabwean problem. A South African problem is a Kenyan problem. And have those young people work together, because with the current education system that has been developed now, which we've copied from the West, you realize that people come out of that education system, they are not ready for the world of work. They are not ready. They need some extra training, right? People aren't being as entrepreneurial enough because there's less exposure to that. It's more routine and process focused rather than allowing children to, or like the students, to think beyond what problems they're finding in their communities and how they can actively play a role in helping change that. So to the question of whether an American education is better than an African education, I would definitely say we need to look at what the different educations have created for their communities. And as it looks like now, it's been a disaster and it's disappointing.
Are you guys learning about cryptocurrency at all in like Bitcoin or anything like that in Zimbabwe or in Mauritius?
So actually, Mauritius, where I'm based now, is working towards becoming the Bitcoin or the blockchain hub of Africa.
Wow. Okay.
So people are actually working around that. And like I was saying, the reason around the fact that in Africa we have we are lacking in terms of other institutions and other technological advancement. There's an open turf to try out as many products and services as possible. Because in Zimbabwe, I'm being told that Bitcoin is being made available something like 13,000 US dollars, which is maybe twice the market value of what other people are getting it for.
Well, say that one more time. So you're saying people in Zimbabwe are paying, because right now Bitcoin's like around $7,000 a Bitcoin. You're saying, yes, but in Zimbabwe, if somebody wants to buy a Bitcoin, they're going to pay about $13,000 for a Bitcoin.
Yes, they're going to pay $13,000. That's crazy, right? And
yeah, that's crazy.
Because, and the reason why that's happening is because in Zimbabwe now we had a mixed foreign currency economy we're using United States dollars, we're using South African rands, we're using a bit of pounds, as well as the recently introduced Zimbabwean bond note. But what that has done is it has created a shortage in the money supply in an economy that's not functioning. So we spend everything and we buy stuff, but we're not producing any of our money. And people have had to resort to cryptocurrencies because all of a sudden there's no cash in the economy. And what's the next solution? So you get to start looking at some of these things, and you can look at how much M-Pesa or mobile money has revolutionized transactions in East Africa. And you just ask yourself, what kind of more potential does Africa have to come up with these new innovations and try out new and amazing ideas?
Wow, that's crazy. I mean, who's able? I mean, are there people who can afford? I mean, right now in Zimbabwe, because are there people that can really afford a $13,000 Bitcoin? Like these Bitcoins are being sold on the black market, because here in America, you just go to Coinbase.com. I mean, how are people buying these Bitcoins? Like, that's weird. Do you know?
So there are definitely certain small companies that have already started in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And they are the ones who are facilitating these transactions. And these are legitimate and legal companies. And because there are other bigger institutions within the economy that want to trade and make transactions, but then there's so many regulations with the formal banking and money system, they are resorting to that. So there are definitely people with $13,000 to buy Bitcoin in Zimbabwe.
Yeah, but that's a scam. I mean, they're paying double the amount of Bitcoin. Because what if Bitcoin doesn't reach $13,000 of Bitcoin?
It's interesting. It's an interesting phenomenon, and you know, it goes a long way to prove so many different points, and the current state of things. And yeah,
And that's weird. That's weird. So I mean, offline we were talking about leadership, African leadership. So this is African Leadership University. Can we, when we talk about African leadership, sometimes we bring up Robert Mugabe and Nelson Mandela.
yeah.
Can we somewhat talk about where Nelson Mandela went right and wrong, and a little bit of where Mugabe went right and wrong, in applying the whatever you learn at the African Leadership University, and kind of breaking that down and going into detail about that?
Okay, so I'll start off with these two guys. They are all liberation heroes in their countries.
Right.
They help liberate their communities from colonial powers. And when you look at the times in which these two guys have existed, Mugabe got independence in 1980, right? And then what that brought is it brought freedom for the black people. It brought democracy for the native Zimbabweans, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that meant that Zimbabweans had access to other opportunities that they didn't have before. And what then happened is, when Zimbabweans went to the Lancaster House Conference, that was on 21 December 1979, where they were negotiating the transition of then Rhodesia into Zimbabwe. The narrative goes that the British government promised to reimburse or to pay back settler white farmers in Zimbabwe that had gotten access to the land that originally belonged to the Zimbabwean people. So that's what you hear about the land question. Who owns the land?
But you know what's crazy, and I know we're not going to go too much in detail on this. So you're saying the British were going to give the white landowners in Zimbabwe pretty much reparations.
Yes, reparations.
But
Based on
what's crazy, and I'll give you I'll give you back the platform, the mic. When Black people talk about reparations for slavery, we're told to get over it. It was so long ago, let it go. Because the same thing happened in America. At the end of slavery, many plantation owners were given reparations by the United States government, which is crazy. But go ahead.
And so they were supposed to pay back they're supposed to give some aid to the new government as well as pay back to the farmers, because these farmers had received title deeds under the British colonial government, and then they had the objective to pay them back. But going into the early 90s, Nelson Mandela is then getting out of jail from Robben Island. Mm-hmm. And South Africa is one of the last remaining countries in Africa, if not the last, to get independence.
Right.
And because there was a Pan-African movement with Kwame Nkrumah, Julius Nyerere, and Robert Mugabe was a hero at that time. By the way, he had been knighted by the Queen, right? People then advised him to because people would then ask him to say, it's been 10 years into independence, and still there's a wide gap of there's still been a wide gap in terms of the spread of resources. Minority, which is the white community, had more resources than the majority of the Black community, right?
Today.
And you had one person owning an entire range of mountains, and even giving land to a 5-year-old kid and saying, this is going to be your land when you grow up. Yet the indigenous people within the country didn't have access to that same resource. So this made people that had won the independence angry. And in 1990, because Mugabe then wanted to answer the same land question and correct it, because of the region, he was then advised to stop focusing on that issue now, because South Africa was also going to be a bloodbath. Apartheid was in its highest peak, and people needed to get Nelson Mandela into power. So what then that made happen is the land question was not addressed ahead of time. And when Nelson Mandela came in, he came up with a new and better perspective as to, let's create a new South Africa where everyone is included, regardless of race, background, gender. And he stayed in power for a few years and then went out. Now, coming back to Mugabe, because Mugabe had gotten power and was afraid to get out of office earlier, because you're slowly getting unpopular with the people. There's something called Gukurawundi, where they massacred thousands of people in Matebeleland, which was as a result of tribal interference, tribal friction between the Shona and the Ndebele. Now that is the point where Mugabe became the person that he is today, because he is directly linked to the massacre of thousands of people in Matebeleland that were questioning his legitimacy as a leader, and that the one tribe within the country was gaining more. And because of that massacre, is unpopular. This is not the only thing. They were also followed by extra things like sending off troops to DRC and printing more money, war veterans demanding reparations for the war that they did, and they want to pay it. So Mugabe, being a politician, found it that's the only way to keep his people happy.
Go ahead.
The only way to find his people, to keep his people happy and to remain popular, was to print extra money. Now, what happens when you print extra money? You cause inflation. At that time, Nelson Mandela is in South Africa and is transitioning with a unit-based government. And he leaves before the question of land is addressed. There's been independence on paper, but in terms of economic and wealth independence, the majority of South Africans today, as we speak, are suffering. There's a huge gap between white monopoly capital and the typical South African who can't afford a typical education. So it might be interesting to know that if Nelson Mandela had stayed longer, he might have been at risk of even being in the same predicament as Robert Mugabe, because you're stuck with the situation where you have to choose one side, either left or right. And your own people are putting pressure on saying, we now want our land, we want to be in control, and these people need to go. And Mugabe is not justified for saying, go and seize your land, which resulted in people being killed over land issues and etc. But today, they are all heroes in their own rights, and some of them might also call them villains as well. Because in Zimbabwe, people will tell you that black people are empowered, black people have access to resources, and it's just the economy that's bad. In South Africa, people say, well, it's a rainbow economy, as etc. etc.
Yeah,
but still
nah. Yeah, I mean, I went to South Africa, and what I noticed is that Indians and whites controlled the economy in South Africa when I was there, you know. Yeah. But you know, somebody brought up a great point in the chat room. African leadership is very old. So if you look at like Canada, I think the president of Canada, he's like maybe 45, maybe if even that. The president of France, I don't think he's 40. So there's more young, I would say, progressive leadership in Europe and in the West right now. But all the African leaders, they have to be, I mean, Buhari almost died. You know, everybody's over 70, probably over 80. What do Africans need to do to ensure that young leadership, I guess, gets into power that think like the young generation who's going to be the majority of Africans and people on this planet?
So that's actually an interesting question, because the question is to ask to say, what does African leadership mean? Right? What does an African typical philosophy on leadership look like? So dating back to history, you'd realize that most African communities were run by dynasties, and people would be presidents and would be kings and chiefs, because the typical African community is made in this way. There's a king, right? Or there's a chief. There's a king, there's a chief, there are sub-chiefs, right? And sub-chiefs have advisors, and then you have the basic individuals, right? Those same institutions exist today as I speak, right? But then they've been blended with the Western philosophy of democracy, etc. You have to have elections, people have to vote, etc. But then we also have chiefs, right? We also have headmen. So because of this particular system, you realize that Africans are not quick to adopt new changes, because by the time information moves from the headman to the presidential office, it's a year, right? And you're not quick to adopt. And because there's a cultural element within the whole issue of having older people respecting elders, I'm sure you've come to Africa on certain occasions and realize that there's a huge emphasis on respecting older people, and that still belongs within the community. And with that, you also know that some of the leadership that we have today is tied to liberation struggles.
Right.
So they form
ANC, ZANU-PF, right?
ANC, ZANU-PF, you name it. So they form a big part of the country's history and legacy, to an extent that people still believe in them, and they still cling onto the power. But like you're saying, people are starting to ask these questions: why can't we have young and more energetic people take the front row in making decisions for the country. You know, they have more energy, they have more experience, and they're not going to get fatigue quickly. So we're
Right.
definitely going to get some changes happening, and it's happening slowly. You know, it's happening slowly as we go on. If you look at, you know, at South Africa, you know, you have the DA coming in with a younger guy. You know, you have the EFF. You know, so you
Hey, real quick, how do you feel about the EFF? Do you think what's his name? What's the guy that the EFF,
Julius
the EFF leader that's running for president? He
Julius
used to be
Malema.
part of the ANC Youth Council. What's his name?
Julius Malema.
Julius Malema. How do you feel about Julius Malema?
You know, he's a young guy. He's definitely seen the problem within the same party that he's been in. And because he's working from the outside now, he's definitely poking holes into where the ANC has been ignoring the status quo, and he's simply doing what he can do within his own capacity. But that also comes with, I do not support radicalism in any way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which, you know, you need a progressive and an environment. But sometimes I feel like for these younger upcoming politicians, they do not have any option but to become radical and noisy so that people actually give them the attention that they need and to be heard. Because already ANC is a really huge party. So what does it mean for a new small party coming in? You simply become a mosquito. You know, try sleeping and there's a mosquito, right? As small as it is, it causes so much noise and irritation. You give it all the attention it has. And I simply think that is what he's doing. He's trying to stay up as much attention as possible and have the ANC try to answer some of the questions on how the current government, Jacob Zuma, uses the state funds to build his own house and to
Right.
refurbish his own house, right? So he's trying to ask some of those questions because people within the ANC might be afraid to do so. So yeah, I think that's his role in this whole process.
What you know, China has been heavily involved in developing the infrastructure of Africa. At the African Leadership University, what are you guys doing to ensure that Africans are being put in positions or learning the skills to develop their own infrastructure?
So questions on how we are impacting people so that they can be able to develop their own infrastructure.
Right, because right now China's building up everywhere, everything planet wide. I mean, they're over here, they're in Jamaica now. Since we had the big hurricane in Barbuda, I believe there's Bermuda and there's Barbuda, something like that. They're about to take over there. I mean, they're all over the planet, just building up and controlling everything. What are Africans doing, or what can Africans learn at African Leadership University where they can be put in a position to, I guess, develop the infrastructure of Africa instead of having to rely on outside forces or people?
So I think with regards to this question, we definitely have to realize one thing. Here at the African Leadership University, we are having a major in electoral power systems and business management, but that's by so far disconnected from the any construction or infrastructural based program, right? And if you can notice the trend that we are having our degrees, we've realized that every particular region and community has a competitive advantage, right? China is far ahead in terms of engineering, like infrastructural ingenuity and creating amazing mega city infrastructure. They are the best at this, and everyone in the world is definitely testifying to the fact that they are, right? So what role does Africa have in developing its own infrastructure? We understand that we have access and own our own resources. And what we're doing is we are educating our young people to be able to identify problems and needs in our own communities and structure good deals and business relationships that get the best people at what they do to impact the continent in a particular way that we think they can. So if Chinese people are good at infrastructure, the local people should know how to negotiate in their own favor and tap into the potential and the knowledge of the Chinese people and collaborate with them to build the continent, because we can teach as many people as possible, right? But within the next 30 years, you're going to need double, triple the amount of buildings that we need.
Right.
Are we going to have the capital? Are we going to have the capital? Are we going to have the experienced labor to do that within the next 30 years? It's a really short period of time, right? So let's get these young people ready with the right mindset to say, you know, you're going to need to do this. Who's able to manage that? Let's create Asian African relationships that allow young people from the continent coming from the African Leadership University to go abroad and say, you know, you're the best manufacturing company in this. Come to Zimbabwe. Let's negotiate on the table. This is what we need. This is how you're going to benefit. And you go do your own business. We do our own business. We build roads. We do etc. Because we are noticing that because of uneducated leadership, right, or corrupt leadership as well.
Mm-hmm.
Infrastructure is government invests so much money in infrastructure, and someone along the value chain squanders the money. And besides manufacturing 20 kilometers of rail, we only make the first the next 15, the next decade to put in place. So kind of like giving people those business like ideas and ability to do that. We've partnered with GE, General Electrics. So it's one of the university partners that we're working with that's directly with our young people in terms of like exposing them to some of these different skills and necessities or utilities that are necessary.
Okay. Let's see. Any questions in the chat room? Farai, thank you so much for coming on. You know, we really appreciate it. Any questions in the chat room that you'd like to ask, Brother Farai? Let's give people a second to post their question. Now, if someone's okay, here we go. If somebody's interested in enrolling into the university, what's the necessary steps? So I'm in Georgia, I'm in America, and I decided, like, look, I want to continue my education at African Leadership University. Walk us through the steps as far as, you know, getting accepted, and then do you guys offer room and board? Is it the typical college setting where you have, you know, your different you know, I don't know, dining rooms, dormitories, and all that? Like, what's the process, and what can we expect if once someone is accepted and decides they want to make that step and continue their education at African Leadership University?
Okay, so with African Leadership University, the whole application period takes at least close to 6 months before you actually get into the university. So before you get in, you have your typical, you don't need SATs. You do what they call the Africa Rising course, right? Which taps into trying to get potential applicants to interact with particular content on some of these issues that we've been talking about, right? Because we need to have a community of people that are aware or at least are showing the interest to learn about this. So it's to test for your endurance in learning the process. And then you write 2 tests, very short tests, a mathematics and an English test. And then afterwards, you submit your essays. They'll then come back to you and offer you either a place or you don't get a place. And what then that does is, from month 1 to month 3, you're doing your online courses and getting to interact with other applicants from across the world who are trying to get into the university. And then you write your essays and then your exam, your final test. You get your offer letter. After you get your offer letter, you then the offer letter comes with the different expectations in terms of what you need for your degree program, what you need for your on-campus initiatives, and if asking you the question if you need financial aid. So if you can pay if you can pay the full amount, that means that it's going to be different. So for African students, it's 12,000. For abroad students, it's 15,000 annually.
And that's a year, correct?
That's per year.
Okay. I mean, shoot, that's cheaper than the majority of universities here in America. And does that include room and board, or?
So what this encompasses is, there's food. So you get to eat there. They get to give you accommodation,
Mhm.
and the tuition. So pretty much everything is catered for within that package. And then, yeah.
That's not bad. I mean, $15,000, room and board, food, get your education, your degree. That's not bad at all.
Yeah, it's really not bad.
Now, do you guys have like a master's program or PhD program yet, or
We have an MBA program,
MBA?
but yeah, we have an MBA program. It's not a fully residential MBA program. They do have periodic meetups in Rwanda because that's where the headquarters of the MBA school is. So you can check it out. It's called the African Leadership University School of Business. We're offering one of the first type of MBAs, which is focused on Pan-African business networks and ecosystems and how we can impact them. So yeah, it's a really different approach to reimagining the MBA as well. So yeah.
I mean, you could get an MBA, everything included, room and board, food, for $15,000 a year.
Yeah. So for the MBA, it's actually 20.
That's
That's
still
like
not bad, because I mean, all your expenses are included, like food and room and board. I mean, that's an excellent. I mean, that's a deal. I mean, and then do you guys offer any type of employment opportunities as far as people who are in school that want to work? Maybe they could work as far as financial aid to help pay for their towards their tuition. Do you guys offer that at all?
So we actually do offer like on-campus jobs, and people can work on campus, off campus, with so many corporate partners and other institutions and companies that, and before you can go for your internship. We've had students even from here interning across Africa, South Africa, Japan. Some people have interned there in the States, in Europe and France. So people get access to a whole network of opportunities, and you can definitely work and get a good job that is able to take care of your needs.
Okay. Now, what's the what's the website for the actual school? I could post it in the chat room.
African Leadership University Education.
African Leadership, all African Leadership University Education, all spelled out, or is African Leadership University.edu?
Okay, let me send you the link.
Yeah, just if you want to email it to me or text it to me.
So it's alueducation.com.
Okay, got it. Okay, put that in chat. alueducation.com. Just a suggestion. A lot of the universities, primarily they use the .edu ending or prefix or stuff, whatever it is. I would recommend probably like just alu.edu instead of .com. That's just what universities do out here. So yeah, but let's see here. What about airports, hotels, or are they owned by African citizens or are they owned by foreigners? Oh, that's a that's a separate question. Okay, let me ask you this. In Mauritius, um,
Yeah.
is there a lot of Black-owned businesses, or is it everything primarily ran by foreigners? As far as like hotels, any type of infrastructure, is it Black-owned or is it primarily foreigners in Mauritius?
So in Mauritius, because they are having really reluctant tax systems and etc., you definitely have more foreigners coming in to own hotels and real estate companies. The real estate industry is booming a lot in Mauritius. So you have people coming from South Africa, you have French people, and there are not so many people of color yet investing because definitely there's not a huge amount of them that on the continent that have the capabilities to make such huge investments. But they're definitely mostly foreigners that are based here in Mauritius. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, see, any other questions? We'll take a couple. We'll take one more question. Then I'm gonna let the brother Farai go and enjoy his evening. But Farai, thank you so much for coming back on. We'll do this. You have the floor. Go ahead and close out. Share whatever you want to, and then also give people your contact information so they can reach out to you as well.
Okay, sure. So I think with the whole issue of how the African Leadership University is trying to kind of work with the African community and impacting their people, there's definitely been a realization going forward that the future of the continent is with the young people.
Right.
We need to prioritize them in terms of creating opportunities for them, in terms of exposing them. Because in the next 10, 15 years to come, there are going to be so many young people on the negotiation tables. People are going to write policy, people that are going to bring employment, people that are going to come out, start generating knowledge for the future. These are all going to be young people. And because Africa is still not as developed, and by the way, you have 7 of the top growing economies out of the 10, out of the top 10 growing economies in the world, 7 of them are in Africa. Mm-hmm. So that has to give you an idea of the amount of opportunities that are coming. Companies like G are coming here, Swiss Re, Coca-Cola is expanding so much. There are huge opportunities for people in Africa. And we need to impact the young people and work closely with them in order to be able to give ownership of this journey that they're going to go on. And because there's not so much development yet, there's an opportunity to create better infrastructure, build new things, try out new products, right? And there's an already existing huge market. And evidence for this can be shown through, M-Pesa in Kenya. Mm-hmm. One of the money transfer that's happening there. Uber is already functioning in South Africa, in Ghana, in Kenya. Airbnb, all these things are being absorbed onto the continent, and they are working really well. The resources are and anyone can definitely come and open a company in Mauritius today. If you invest at least $150,000, they give you citizenship. If
say that country allows, say that one more time. What you just said, that's important. What you just said, say that one more time.
If you invest at least $150,000 plus in either buying a house, right, or whatever, a villa in Mauritius or company, they give you a citizenship. Wow. In Mauritius. If your country allows you to have dual citizenship,
mm-hmm. You can have dual citizenship in America.
Yeah, that means that you can still maintain your American citizenship, but still be a Mauritian citizen, simply because you've invested $250,000, which means that you still get the benefits of both countries. And because the tax systems here in Mauritius are really reluctant, you can get so much benefit from that interaction. There's so many companies opening head offices here in Mauritius, and so much coming in. And what more do you want than a good exotic island stay on with good business regulations and ease of doing business? So there's definitely need for more diasporans to start coming to the continent, because the more you come to Africa and go back with those stories, the more you realize that there's actually a way out. And what is depicted of Africa within and the media, etc., is only telling one side of the story. There's a bigger part of the story. Have you asked yourself why colonization took place in Africa, or why there's so much fighting between Black Africans and white monopoly capital? It's not because those people hate us or they've huge hatred for us. It's because this is where the money is, and this is where they'd rather be, you know, and that's where they're getting the opportunity. So we need to start thinking about this as well.
And Mauritius is a beautiful country as well. It's an absolutely beautiful country. It's gorgeous. And then also too, now is the university in Port Louis? Port Louis?
It's in Mauritius.
Okay. Yeah, Mauritius is an absolutely gorgeous country. So people, if you're thinking about relocating, if you have 150K, there you go. You know, a decent house, halfway decent house in Atlanta is 150K. So if you got 150K, you can buy a house in Mauritius, and it's an absolutely beautiful country. It's an island. So how far of a flight from Mauritius to like we say Joburg? How long of a flight is that roughly?
It's 4 hours. 4 hours flight. 4 hours flight.
Yeah. Okay, that's not bad. Not bad at all. What about to like Dar es Salaam, Tanzania?
I think 5.
5. Okay. Cool,
So,
but
I think I might have to go now.
yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I appreciate you coming on, man. Thank you so much. And this is your home, so whenever you want to come back on, talk about something or share anything, just let me know, and you're more than welcome to come on. But thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for hosting me. And it was a really huge pleasure to kind of communicate with you, and I look forward to more engagement. So if you wish to get in touch with me, I'm available on Facebook and Twitter. Farai Munjoma, Farai Munjoma, Munjoma. I'm available on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. So we can definitely keep in touch and take this offline. If you happen to come in to Mauritius, I'm available. Or if you go to Zimbabwe, just stay in touch, and we definitely reconnect from there.
Farai, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, and have a good day.
All right, peace. Thank you. All right, you guys. So, thank you everybody that joined us this morning. I hope that helped. I hope there was some value in this. Just want to spotlight some other opportunities and resources for people that, they might not know about. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't, if you're new to this page. Make sure you share the page, the channel, like the videos. Also the super chat button, if you found value in this, always hit the super chat. So, it takes a lot of time and resources to find people like this who are willing to come on this platform and give information like this that's not really readily accessible, that you might not know about. So hit the super chat button as well. Also go to searchforhuru.com, go to dynastymir.com, go to amazon.com, search your name, Dynasty Mir, please buy a book. Also search for Huru on Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, and Facebook. Make sure you like, subscribe, follow me on all those platforms. Dynasty Mir, till next time, peace.